The first sign that something had gone terribly wrong came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning when Maya Chen's phone buzzed with a text message that made her stomach drop like a stone through still water. Final notice: your $45,000 personal loan payment is now 90 days past due. Contact us immediately to avoid legal action. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Maya stared at the screen, her coffee growing cold in her trembling hands as she sat in her cramped studio apartment overlooking the rain-soaked streets of Portland. The gray morning light filtered through her single window, casting everything in the same dull shade as her confusion. She had never taken out a loan. Not for $45,000. Not for $45. Her credit was pristine. She'd spent years rebuilding it after the financial chaos of her early 20s, treating each on-time payment like a small victory against the economic uncertainty that had defined her generation. The phone rang moments later, and Maya found herself speaking to Jennifer, a collections agent whose voice carried the practiced patience of someone who had delivered bad news 1,000 times before. Jennifer's words fell like hammer blows. Unauthorized loans, multiple accounts, fraudulent applications dating back 6 months, Maya's social security number, her mother's maiden name, her childhood address, all used to secure credit she'd never seen. Ma'am, I need to ask you directly. Are you absolutely certain you didn't apply for these loans? Sometimes people forget, or family members might have helped with paperwork. Family members. The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, and Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. She thought of her sister, Lily. Beautiful, charming Lily who always seemed to dance just outside the reach of consequence. Lily, who had been staying with their parents recently, who had access to old documents, old mail, old memories stored in cardboard boxes in their childhood home. "I need copies of everything," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. The documents arrived by email within an hour, and Maya's world shifted on its axis. There, in digital black and white, was her own signature, or something that looked remarkably like it, her social security number, her birth date, her employment history carefully fabricated to show a salary 3 times what she actually made as a nonprofit counselor. The applications painted a picture of a woman who didn't exist: successful, wealthy, creditworthy enough to borrow money she could never hope to repay. But the address confirmed Maya's worst fears. The loans had been sent to 1247 Maple Street, their childhood home, where their parents still live, where Lily had moved back 6 months ago after her latest relationship imploded in spectacular fashion. Maya had been there for Sunday dinner just 2 weeks before, sitting at the same kitchen table where she'd done homework as a child, watching Lily charm their parents with stories that always seemed to cast her as the victim of circumstances beyond her control. Maya's hands shook as she scrolled through bank statements she'd never seen, showing deposits and withdrawals from accounts opened in her name. The money had been moved quickly, methodically, some transferred to accounts she didn't recognize, others withdrawn in cash from ATMs across the city. It was sophisticated, planned, executed with a precision that spoke of desperation masquerading as intelligence. She called her best friend Rosa, who worked as a paralegal downtown and had always been Maya's voice of reason. Rosa arrived within an hour, bringing coffee and the kind of fierce loyalty that had sustained their friendship through a decade of shared struggles. Rosa spread the documents across Maya's small dining table like a general planning a battle, her dark eyes scanning each page with professional intensity. "This is bad, Maya," Rosa said, her usually warm voice tight with anger. "This isn't just someone stealing your identity to buy a purse or something. This is organized fraud, federal crime territory." Maya sank into her chair, feeling the weight of betrayal settle on her shoulders like a lead blanket. She thought of Lily as a child, bright, mischievous, always able to talk her way out of trouble with a smile and a sob story. She thought of the years they'd grown apart, of holidays that became tense with unspoken grievances, of phone calls that always seemed to end with Lily asking for help she could never quite repay. "What do I do?" Maya whispered, though she already knew the answer. Rosa's expression was gentle but firm. "You call the police. You file a report. And then?" Rosa paused, reaching across the table to squeeze Maya's hand. "Then you call your parents before they find out from someone else." The call to her parents was the hardest thing Maya had ever done. Her mother's voice cracked when Maya explained the situation, and she could hear her father's sharp intake of breath in the background. They'd raised two daughters in that house on Maple Street, had loved them equally, had somehow failed to see that one of them had learned to take love as something owed rather than given. "She's been so stressed," her mother said, as if stress could excuse stealing someone's entire financial identity. "The divorce was hard on her, and she's been looking for work." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the familiar pattern begin. The excuses, the explanations, the gentle pressure to understand, to forgive, to be the bigger person because Lily was fragile and Maya was strong. But strength, Maya was learning, had its limits. And $45,000 in fraudulent debt was apparently where she found hers. The next morning, Maya walked into the FBI field office downtown, carrying a folder thick with evidence and a heart heavy with the knowledge that there was no going back from this moment. Special Agent David Park was younger than she'd expected, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the sort of careful attention that made her feel heard rather than judged. Identity theft cases involving family members are particularly difficult, Agent Park explained as he reviewed her documentation. There's often a pattern of financial abuse that goes back years, and the emotional component makes prosecution complicated. But what your sister has done here, he gestured to the stack of fraudulent loan documents, this crosses several federal boundaries. Mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft. We're talking about serious federal charges. Maya felt a strange mixture of vindication and nausea. She'd come here hoping for validation that what had happened to her mattered, that it was criminal and serious and not just another family drama to be swept under the rug of sibling rivalry. "What happens next?" she asked. Agent Park leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "We investigate, we build a case, and if the evidence supports it, we arrest the perpetrator." He paused, studying Maya's face. "Are you prepared for that possibility, Miss Chen? Are you prepared for your sister to face federal charges?" Maya thought of Lily laughing at Christmas dinner, of the sister who had taught her to braid her hair and shared late-night secrets in their childhood bedroom. She thought of the years they'd grown apart, of holidays that became tense with unspoken grievances, of phone calls that always seemed to end with Lily asking for help she could never quite repay. Maya thought of last Christmas, of Lily laughing at Christmas dinner, of the sister who had taught her to braid her hair and shared late-night secrets in their childhood bedroom. She thought of $45,000 in debt that could destroy her credit for years, of the violation of trust that ran deeper than money. She thought of all the times she'd made excuses for Lily, all the times the family had asked her to be understanding, to be forgiving, to be the responsible one because Lily was fragile and Maya was strong. "Yes," she said, and the word fell between them like a gavel. "I'm prepared." But even as she said it, Maya wondered if preparation meant anything when you were about to watch your family implode. She left the FBI office with Agent Park's business card in her pocket and a case number that would change everything. The rain had stopped, and the Portland streets gleamed wet and black under a sky that couldn't decide between gray and blue. Maya stood on the sidewalk, feeling the weight of what she'd set in motion. Somewhere across the city, Lily was going about her day, probably believing she'd gotten away with it, probably already planning her next move. But the wheels of federal justice had begun to turn, and Maya knew with a certainty that felt both empowering and heartbreaking that nothing would ever be the same. The question that haunted her as she walked back to her car wasn't whether she'd done the right thing. She knew she had. The question was whether doing the right thing would feel like anything other than losing her sister forever. And as the first drops of Nin rain began to fall, Maya realized she was about to find out. Maya had always been the responsible one. It was a label that had followed her since childhood, like a shadow she couldn't shake, growing longer and more defined with each passing year. While Lily painted her nails in rainbow colors and snuck out to meet boys, Maya studied for tests she'd already aced twice over. While Lily convinced their parents she needed a car for her emotional well-being, Maya saved every dollar from her part-time job at the local library, carefully tracking expenses in a composition notebook that became her first budget. The morning after filing the FBI report, Maya woke at 5:30 a.m. as she had every day for the past 3 years. Her routine was sacred. 20 minutes of meditation, a cup of coffee made from beans she bought in bulk to save money, and 30 minutes reviewing her carefully maintained spreadsheets. Income, expenses, savings goals, credit monitoring. All color-coded and cross-referenced because financial security felt like the only kind of security she could actually control. Maya worked at the Pacific Northwest Youth Crisis Center, a nonprofit tucked into a converted Victorian house in southeast Portland. The building always smelled like coffee and hope, with mismatched furniture donated by families whose children had found their way through the maze of adolescent crisis and emerged whole on the other side. Maya's office was barely larger than a closet, with a window that looked out onto a small garden where teenagers sometimes sat when the weight of their problems felt too heavy for indoor spaces. She specialized in financial counseling for young adults aging out of foster care, kids who'd never learned to balance a checkbook because they'd been too busy surviving, who trusted no one with money because everyone who was supposed to protect them had failed. Maya understood their wariness, their assumption that every adult was working an angle. She'd learned to earn trust slowly, to celebrate small victories like a first savings account or a credit score that finally crept above 600. "You're different from other counselors," 17-year-old Marcus had told her once, slouched in the donated armchair across from her desk. "You don't talk about money like it's just numbers. You get that it's about whether you can sleep at night." Maya did understand. She remembered the bone-deep anxiety of her early 20s when she'd made too many financial mistakes and felt like she was drowning in debt she'd accumulated trying to keep up with Lily's easy confidence. She remembered the humiliation of having her card declined at a grocery store, the shame of moving back in with her parents at 24, the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding her credit score point by point. But she also remembered the moment it all clicked, the profound relief of having money in savings, of knowing she could handle an emergency, of never again having to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. Financial stability wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, autonomy, and the radical act of taking care of yourself in a world that often felt designed to knock you down. Now, sitting at her desk and trying to concentrate on budget worksheets for next week's group session, Maya felt that hard-won stability cracking beneath her feet. $45,000 in fraudulent debt. The number kept running through her mind like a broken record, each repetition making it feel more unreal and more devastating simultaneously. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Lily says she needs to talk to you. She's very upset about something. Can you call her?" Maya stared at the message, feeling a familiar knot form in her stomach. Even now, even knowing what Lily had done, their mother was positioning Maya as the one responsible for fixing it. The family dynamics that had shaped their childhood hadn't changed. Lily was still the one who needed rescuing, and Maya was still the one expected to do the rescuing.
She thought about the last time she'd really talked to Lily, not just exchanging pleasantries at family gatherings. It had been 4 months ago, right after Lily's divorce was finalized. Lily had called her, crying, saying she didn't know how she was going to manage on her own. She'd never lived alone, never paid her own bills, never had to figure out health insurance or car registration or any of the mundane responsibilities that Maya had been handling since college. "I don't know how to be an adult like you," Lily had sobbed into the phone. "Everything is so complicated, and I'm scared I'm going to mess it all up." Maya had spent 2 hours on that call, walking Lily through the basics of budgeting, explaining how to set up automatic bill payments, offering to help her create a plan for rebuilding her finances after the divorce. She'd felt useful, needed, like maybe their relationship could evolve into something healthier now that Lily was facing real consequences for the first time in her life. But Lily had never called her back about the budget. Their mother mentioned that Lily was figuring things out, but Maya hadn't heard from her sister directly until now, until the aftermath of a federal crime committed using Maya's identity. Maya's colleague, James, knocked on her doorframe and peered in with concern. James was in his 50s, a former social worker who'd found his way to financial counseling after watching too many clients struggle not just with trauma, but with the economic consequences of trauma. He had the sort of steady presence that made crisis feel manageable, and Maya had learned to trust his instincts about both clients and life. "You look like someone ran over your dog," James observed, settling into the chair across from her desk. "What's going on?" Maya had intended to keep the situation private, but something about James's straightforward kindness broke through her resolve. She found herself explaining everything: the phone call, the documents, the FBI report, the terrible certainty that her sister had stolen her identity and $45,000. James listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When Maya finished, he was quiet for a long moment, drumming his fingers against the arm of his chair. "I'm sorry. This is awful, Maya, and I want you to know you did the right thing filing that report." "Did I?" Maya asked, surprised by the doubt in her own voice. "She's my sister. What if I could have handled it differently? What if I could have just talked to her first?" James leaned forward, his expression gentle but firm. "Maya, you counsel people who've been financially abused. What would you tell a client who came in with this story?" Maya knew the answer immediately. She'd tell them that financial abuse was a serious crime, that family relationships didn't excuse theft, that protecting yourself wasn't selfish. She'd tell them that people who truly loved them wouldn't put them in impossible positions, wouldn't force them to choose between justice and loyalty. "I'd tell them to file a police report," she admitted. "Exactly." James stood up, pausing at her door. "And Maya, don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting yourself, not even family, especially not family." After James left, Maya sat alone in her office watching teenagers drift through the garden outside her window. Some of them had been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love them most. Some of them had learned, too young, that survival sometimes meant making hard choices about who to trust and who to walk away from. Maya had always thought that being an adult meant you stopped having to make those choices, that families were supposed to be the safe harbor you could count on. But watching her clients over the years, she'd slowly realized that some people never got safe harbors. Some people had to build their own boats and learn to navigate by themselves.
Her phone rang and Maya's heart jumped when she saw Lily's name on the caller ID. For a moment, she considered not answering, but curiosity won over caution, and she picked up on the fourth ring. "Maya?" Lily's voice was small, shaky, nothing like the confident tone Maya remembered. I need to see you. Can we meet somewhere? I need to explain something." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the familiar pull of her sister's need, the ingrained habit of trying to fix whatever was broken in Lily's life. But $45,000 sat between them now, along with forged signatures and federal agents and the slow, terrible process of justice. "I don't think that's a good idea right now, Lily," I said carefully. "Please." Lily's voice cracked. "I know you're angry, but if you could just let me explain. I never meant for this to happen. It got so complicated, and I thought I could fix it before you found out. I thought I could pay it back." Maya had something sharp and hot rise in her chest. Not anger exactly, but something deeper and more painful. It was the feeling of recognizing that someone you loved had looked at your life and seen only an opportunity to take. "You used my identity to steal $45,000, Lily. How exactly did you think you were going to fix that?" Silence stretched between them, filled with everything they'd never said to each other, all the ways their family had failed to teach them how to love without taking, how to need without consuming. "I'm sorry," Lily whispered finally. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I never wanted to hurt you." Maya thought of her clients, of the things they'd taught her about apologies and accountability. Intent mattered less than impact. Sorry mattered less than changed behavior. And sorry certainly mattered less than $45,000 in fraudulent debt. I have to go, Lily, and I need you to know I've already filed a report with the FBI. This isn't something we can fix between us anymore. The sound Lily made wasn't quite a gasp and wasn't quite a sob, but it carried the weight of someone finally understanding that actions had consequences, that Maya wasn't going to rescue her this time. After Maya hung up, she sat in her office as the afternoon light shifted through her window, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Tomorrow, she would go back to helping teenagers learn how to manage money and build stable lives. She would teach them about budgets and credit scores and the importance of protecting their social security numbers. But today, she was learning her own lesson about stability and protection and the courage it took to save yourself, even when saving yourself felt like losing everything else. The call from Agent Park came 3 days later, just as Maya was settling into what she'd hoped would be a quiet Friday evening. She'd spent the week trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, focusing on her clients, avoiding her family's increasingly frantic phone calls, and researching everything she could about identity theft recovery. The stack of documents on her kitchen table had grown into something resembling a legal brief, annotated with sticky notes and highlighted in 3 different colors. "Miss Chen, we've made some discoveries I think you need to hear about," Agent Park said, without preamble. His voice carried a weight that made my stomach clench with anticipation. "Can you come in tomorrow morning? And you might want to bring someone with you for support." Maya arrived at the FBI office the next morning with Rosa, who had insisted on taking the day off work despite Maya's protests. The federal building seemed even more imposing in the daylight, its concrete facade reflecting the gray Pacific Northwest sky like an unwelcoming mirror. Rosa squeezed Maya's hand as they passed through security, a gesture that felt like an anchor in a storm Maya hadn't fully understood she was still weathering. Agent Park led them to a conference room where manila folders were arranged in neat stacks across a long table. Maya recognized some of the documents, copies of the loan applications she'd already seen, bank statements from accounts she'd never opened, but there were new folders, thicker ones, with labels that made her heart race. Additional fraudulent accounts, wire transfer records, and related criminal activity. "Your sister has been busy," Agent Park said, his tone carefully neutral, as he opened
First folder. What we initially thought was a single incident of identity theft has expanded into something much larger. Miss Chen, are you familiar with anyone named Derek Morrison? Maya shook her head, though something about the name felt vaguely familiar, like a half-remembered conversation from years ago. He's Lily's ex-boyfriend from about 2 years ago, lives in Seattle. It appears they've been working together on this for at least 8 months. Agent Park spread out a series of photographs, surveillance shots from ATMs, bank security footage, images of people Maya didn't recognize withdrawing money from accounts opened in her name. "Working together how?" Rosa asked, her paralegal training kicking in as she leaned forward to study the documents. "Identity theft ring," Agent Park explained. "They've been using not just your information, Maya, but information from at least 6 other victims, family members, friends, people who trusted them with access to personal documents. The total fraudulent amount is approaching $300,000. Maya felt the room spin slightly. $300,000? The number was so large it felt abstract, like a figure from a news story about someone else's life. But there, in the photographs and bank statements spread across the table, was her sister's face, captured by security cameras as she withdrew money from accounts Maya had never authorized. "There's more," Agent Park continued gently. "Your sister contacted our office yesterday. She wants to make a deal." Maya felt her blood freeze. What kind of deal?
She's claiming she was coerced by Morrison, that she was essentially a victim of domestic abuse who was forced to commit these crimes under duress. She's offering to testify against him in exchange for reduced charges. Rosa made a sound of disgust. Even now she's trying to manipulate the situation, making herself the victim? Maya stared at the photographs again, at her sister's relaxed smile, at the confident way she operated the ATM, at the systematic way she'd organized the theft of hundreds of thousands of dollars from people who trusted her. Nothing about Lily's behavior suggested coercion or fear. Everything suggested calculated greed. "What's your assessment?" Maya asked Agent Park. "Do you think she's telling the truth about being coerced?" Agent Park's expression was diplomatically neutral, but his answer was clear. The evidence suggests that Ms. Lily Chen was a willing and active participant in these crimes. Her communications with Morrison, her behavior during the commission of the offenses, her sophisticated knowledge of financial systems, none of it supports a theory of coercion. Maya felt a strange sense of relief mixed with profound sadness. Part of her had wanted Lily to be a victim, had wanted there to be some explanation that would make sense of the betrayal, so a way to preserve the relationship they'd once had. But Lily had made her choices, and those choices had consequences that extended far beyond their family. "She's going to blame me," Maya said suddenly. "When this all comes out, she's going to say I destroyed our family by reporting her. My parents are going to think I should have handled it differently." Rosa reached across the table and took Maya's hand. "Maya, you didn't destroy your family. Lily did that when she decided to commit federal crimes using your identity." Agent Park nodded in agreement. "Ms. Chen, I want you to understand something. Identity theft destroys lives. The victims we work with sometimes spend years rebuilding their credit, their financial stability, their ability to trust. What your sister did to you, what she did to all her victims, has real, lasting consequences. Reporting it wasn't vindictive or cruel, it was necessary." After they left the FBI office, Maya and Rosa sat in Maya's car in the parking garage, neither of them speaking for several minutes. The weight of what was coming, the arrests, the media coverage, the family explosion, the trial, settled around them like a heavy blanket. "I need to call my parents," Maya said finally. "They need to hear this from me before they see it on the news." The conversation with her parents was even worse than Maya had anticipated. Her mother cried, her father grew silent and angry, and both of them seemed to believe that somehow this could all be fixed if Maya would just drop the charges and work it out as a family. "She's your sister," her mother kept saying, as if blood relationship trumped federal law. "Families forgive each other. Families protect each other." "What about protecting me?" Maya asked. "Where was the family protection when Lily was stealing my identity for almost a year?" But her parents couldn't hear that question. They were too focused on the daughter who was about to be arrested, too afraid to lose Lily to really understand what they'd already lost when she decided Maya's financial security was less important than her own immediate gratification. The weekend before Lily's arrest was the longest of Maya's life. She found herself jumping at every phone call, checking news websites obsessively, replaying conversations with her sister from the past year, and looking for signs she'd missed. Had Lily been planning this during our phone calls about budgeting? Had she been taking notes on Maya's financial advice so she could use it to steal more effectively? Maya's phone rang constantly. Reporters who had somehow gotten her number, family friends who had heard rumors, distant relatives offering unwanted opinions about family loyalty and forgiveness. She stopped answering calls from numbers she didn't recognize, but the voicemails piled up like debris after a storm. On Sunday evening, Maya's doorbell rang. She looked through the peephole and saw her parents standing on her doorstep, looking older than she'd ever seen them. Her father's shoulders were slumped with defeat, and her mother's eyes were red from crying. "We need to talk," her father said when Maya opened the door. They sat in Maya's small living room, the space feeling cramped and uncomfortable with the weight of everything unsaid between them. Maya's parents looked around at her carefully maintained apartment, the budget binders neatly organized on her bookshelf, the thank you cards from clients tucked around her mirror, the evidence of a life built on responsibility and hard work.
"We know we failed," her mother said quietly. "We know we let Lily get away with too much, asked too much of you, made excuses we shouldn't have made." Maya felt tears threaten for the first time in days. This acknowledgement, so long overdue, felt both healing and devastating. "But she's still our daughter," her father added, "and we're asking you, begging you, to find some way to help her that doesn't involve federal prison." Maya looked at her parents, at the desperation in their faces, at their inability to understand that, helping Lily had become impossible the moment she decided to commit federal crimes. They wanted Maya to be responsible for fixing this, just as she'd been responsible for managing their family dynamics her entire life. "I can't help her," Maya said. "She committed crimes, Mom and Dad. Serious federal crimes. Against me. Against other people who trusted her. The time for helping her was before she decided to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from innocent people." Her parents left that night without resolution, and Maya knew that this conversation would define their relationship going forward. They would always see her as the daughter who chose justice over family loyalty. She would always know that they had asked her to sacrifice her own well-being to protect the daughter who had never learned to protect anyone but herself. As Maya prepared for bed, she thought about her clients, about the teenagers she counseled who had been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love them most. Tomorrow, she would understand their experience in a way she'd never wanted to. Tomorrow, she would learn what it felt like when choosing to protect yourself meant losing your family. But tonight, in her quiet apartment with her carefully balanced budget and her hard-won financial security, Maya felt something she hadn't expected: relief. The worst was coming, but at least she would meet it with her integrity intact. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical for Portland in late autumn, but Maya felt as if the weather was reflecting the darkness of what was about to unfold. She had barely slept, spending most of the night staring at her ceiling and listening to the sound of rain against her windows. At 6 a.m., she gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee with hands that trembled slightly as she measured the grounds. Agent Park had told her the arrests would happen early, before the suspects could establish alibis or disposed of evidence. Maya found herself checking the news obsessively, refreshing local websites every few minutes, waiting for confirmation that the other shoe had finally dropped. The call came at 7:43 a.m. "Miss Chen, this is Agent Park. We've executed the arrest warrants. Your sister and 3 co-conspirators are in federal custody." Maya sank onto her couch, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and devastation. How did it go? "Your sister collapsed when we arrived at your parents' house. She's been taken to the hospital for evaluation, but she's physically fine. We believe it was a panic response." Agent Park's voice was carefully professional, but Maya could hear the subtle note of satisfaction beneath his words. "She'll be processed as soon as she's medically cleared." Maya thought of Lily fainting, of her parents watching federal agents arrest their daughter in the house where she and Lily had grown up. She imagined her mother's face, her father's shock, the neighbors gathering to witness the destruction of a family they'd known for decades. "What happens now?" Maya asked. "Arraignment is scheduled for Wednesday. The charges are substantial: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, money laundering. The prosecution is seeking detention pending trial because of the flight risk and the extent of the criminal enterprise." Criminal enterprise. The word sounded so clinical, so removed from the messy reality of family dynamics and sibling rivalry and a lifetime of enabling behavior that had finally reached its logical conclusion. Maya called in sick to work, knowing she couldn't concentrate on helping teenagers with their problems while her own life was imploding in real time. She spent the morning fielding phone calls from relatives she hadn't spoken to in years, all of them wanting details, all of them offering opinions about what she should or shouldn't have done.
Her cousin Jennifer from Sacramento was particularly vocal. "I can't believe you called the FBI on your own sister. Family is supposed to stick together, Maya. Whatever happened to forgiveness?" Maya found herself having the same conversation over and over, explaining that forgiveness didn't mean enabling criminal behavior, that family loyalty didn't require sacrificing her own financial future. But the responses were always the same. She was being too harsh, too unforgiving, too willing to destroy family bonds over just money. Just money. As if $45,000 in fraudulent debt was pocket change. As if her credit score and financial stability were trivial concerns. As if the violation of trust involved in identity theft was something that could be smoothed over with apologies and family dinners.
The story broke on the local news that afternoon. Maya watched in horrified fascination as a reporter stood outside her parents' house, explaining how a local woman had been arrested for allegedly running an identity theft ring that defrauded victims of hundreds of thousands of dollars. The reporter mentioned that one of the victims was the suspect's own sister, painting Maya as both a victim and somehow a villain for reporting the crime. The comments on social media were brutal. People who knew nothing about the situation offered opinions about family loyalty and forgiveness. Some supported Maya's decision, praising her courage and reporting a crime regardless of family relationships. But others condemned her as cold, calculating, the kind of person who would destroy her own sister over money. Maya's phone rang constantly. Reporters wanted interviews, talk shows wanted her to appear as a guest, true crime podcasters wanted to tell her story. She ignored them all, but their persistence felt like another violation, another way that Lily's choices were continuing to damage Maya's life. The most painful call came from her high school friend Angela, someone Maya hadn't spoken to in over a year, but who had seen the news coverage. "Maya, I'm so sorry this happened to you," Angela said, her voice warm with genuine sympathy. "But I have to ask, did you really have no idea what Lily was doing? I mean, you work in financial counseling. Didn't you notice anything strange?" The question hit Maya like a physical blow. Had she been naive? Should she have been more suspicious? Should she have monitored her credit more carefully, been less trusting with her personal information, assumed that her own sister was capable of sophisticated financial fraud? "I checked my credit reports regularly," Maya said defensively, "but Lily had access to information from years ago, from when we lived at home. She knew things about me that wouldn't show up on normal identity monitoring." After Angela hung up, Maya sat in her apartment feeling a new kind of violation. Not only had Lily stolen her identity, but now Maya was being blamed for not preventing it, for not being paranoid enough, for trusting her family with information that normal people shared without thinking twice. The arraignment on Wednesday was a media circus. Maya arrived at the federal courthouse with Rosa, both of them wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy weather, trying to avoid the cameras that followed their every step. Maya had never been inside a federal courthouse before, and the marble floors and high ceilings made her feel small and intimidated. Lily appeared in an orange jumpsuit, flanked by a public defender who looked harried and overwhelmed. Maya barely recognized her sister. Lily's usual perfect makeup was gone, her hair was unwashed, and she had dark circles under her eyes that made her look older than her 31 years. When Lily's eyes found Maya in the gallery, the expression on her face was one of pure hatred. Maya felt her breath catch. She had expected sadness, maybe shame, possibly even remorse, but the fury in Lily's gaze was unmistakable, as if Maya were the criminal, as if reporting the theft of her own identity was somehow the real crime in this courtroom.
The charges read against Lily were extensive and devastating. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 18 counts. Mail fraud, 22 counts. Identity theft, 15 counts. Money laundering, 8 counts. The prosecutor explained that the government was seeking detention pending trial due to the sophisticated nature of the crimes, and the defendants' demonstrated ability to manipulate and defraud victims. Lily's public defender argued for bail, claiming that his client was a first-time offender who posed no flight risk. Maya nearly stood up and shouted when she heard first-time offender. Agent Park had shown her evidence of Lily's previous criminal activity, smaller frauds that had apparently never been prosecuted. "Your Honor," the prosecutor countered, the defendant's own sister, who was also one of her victims, had provided evidence that this criminal behavior has been ongoing for years. The defendant systematically exploited relationships with family members and friends to gather personal information, which she then used to commit increasingly sophisticated financial crimes. The total amount defrauded exceeds $300,000, and the victims include elderly relatives and young adults just starting their financial lives. Maya felt a flush of gratitude toward the prosecutor for acknowledging the human cost of Lily's crimes. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet.
They were people whose lives had been damaged, whose trust had been violated, whose financial futures had been compromised by someone they loved. The judge denied bail. As Lily was led away in handcuffs, she turned one last time to stare at Maya, and the look she gave her was filled with such venom that Maya actually took a step backward. This was not her sister anymore. This was a stranger wearing Lily's face, a criminal who blamed everyone but herself for the consequences of her choices. Outside the courthouse, Maya was ambushed by reporters shouting questions. How does it feel to send your own sister to prison? Do you regret reporting her to the FBI? What would you say to people who think you should have handled this as a family matter? Rosa pushed through the crowd, shielding Maya from the cameras and microphones, but not before Maya heard one reporter describing her as the sister who chose money over family. The characterization stung because it was so fundamentally wrong. Maya had chosen justice over enabling, accountability over complicity, her own well-being over a dysfunctional family system that had protected Lily's destructive behavior for decades. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and media attention that Maya never wanted. The story had apparently struck a nerve with people across the country. Some viewers saw Maya as a hero, a woman who had the courage to hold even family members accountable for their crimes. Others saw her as a cold, vindictive person who had destroyed her family over money. Maya received hundreds of emails and messages, most of them from strangers who felt compelled to share their opinions about her choices. Some were supportive. You did the right thing. I was financially abused by my brother for years, and I wish I had your courage to report him before he destroyed my credit completely. Thank you for showing that family doesn't mean accepting criminal behavior. My sister stole from me too, and everyone told me to work it out privately. You're inspiring me to file charges. But others were cruel. You're a terrible sister and a terrible person. Family is everything, and you threw yours away over money you probably didn't even need. I hope you're happy now that your sister is in federal prison. I hope it was worth destroying your parents' lives and your family's reputation. The messages that hurt most were the ones that claimed Maya was somehow responsible for creating the circumstances that led to Lily's crimes, that she had been too successful, too stable, too proud of her financial responsibility, and that her success had somehow driven Lily to criminal behavior out of jealousy and desperation. Her therapist, Dr. Sarah Martinez, whom Maya had started seeing after the initial shock of discovering the identity theft, helped her work through these doubts. Maya, Dr. Martinez said during one particularly difficult session, what you're experiencing is classic victim blaming, including self-victim blaming. You're trying to find ways to make yourself responsible for someone else's criminal choices, because it's easier to believe you had control over the situation than to accept that someone you loved was capable of such deliberate harm. Maya sank deeper into the comfortable chair in Dr. Martinez's office, feeling the truth of those words settle into her bones. But what if I was too harsh with her over the years? What if I was too proud of being responsible, too critical of her mistakes? Even if that were true, and I don't think it is, would that justify identity theft? Would it justify stealing $45,000 from you? Would it justify committing fraud against multiple other victims? Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. Maya, you've been conditioned by your family system to take responsibility for Lily's emotions and choices, but her choices are hers alone. The breakthrough came during Maya's fourth session with Dr. Martinez, when Maya finally admitted something she'd been afraid to say out loud. I'm relieved, Maya whispered, tears starting to flow for the first time since the arrest. I'm relieved that she's in jail, that she can't hurt me anymore, that I don't have to worry about what she might do next. And I feel guilty for being relieved. Why do you think you feel guilty about protecting yourself? Dr. Martinez asked quickly. Because good sisters don't feel relieved when their siblings go to prison. Good sisters find a way to help. Good sisters don't give up on family. Dr. Martinez handed Maya a tissue and waited while she cried.
deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from years of suppressed frustration and hurt and betrayal. Maya, Dr. Martinez said when the crying subsided, what if being a good sister meant refusing to enable destructive behavior? What if being a good sister meant holding someone accountable when they hurt innocent people? What if being a good sister meant protecting yourself so that you could continue helping others instead of being destroyed by someone else's choices? Maya looked up, considering these questions for the first time. She thought about her clients, about the teenagers she counseled who had been abused and neglected by family members. She never told those kids to forgive their abusers or to prioritize family loyalty over their own safety. She helped them understand that love didn't require accepting harm, that healing sometimes meant creating boundaries, that protecting yourself wasn't selfish or cruel. I would never tell one of my clients to accept financial abuse from a family member. I would never tell them that reporting a crime was wrong just because it involved someone they loved. Then why are you telling yourself that? Maya sat with that question for a long time, feeling something shift inside her chest. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt a flicker of pride instead of guilt. She had been brave. She had protected herself and other victims. She had refused to be complicit in criminal behavior, even when the criminal was someone she loved. The validation she had been seeking from her family would never come. Her parents would always see her as the daughter who destroyed their family. Lily would always blame her for the consequences of her own choices. Extended family and friends would continue to debate whether Maya had been too harsh, too unforgiving, too willing to prioritize justice over family harmony. But Maya was beginning to understand that their opinions didn't actually matter. What mattered was that she had acted with integrity, that she had protected herself and other victims, that she had refused to enable behavior that was harmful and criminal and wrong. 3 weeks after the arraignment, Maya received a letter from one of the other victims, an elderly man named Robert, whose information Lily had stolen and used to secure fraudulent credit cards. The letter was handwritten in shaky script. Dear Miss Chen, I wanted to thank you for reporting your sister to the authorities. I know it must have been difficult to take action against a family member, but your courage in coming forward has helped all of us victims get justice. I am 73 years old, and I thought I would never see the money she stole from me again. Because of your bravery in coming forward, I have hope that I will be made whole. You did the right thing, and I am grateful to you. Maya read the letter 3 times, feeling something warm and healing spread through her chest. This was why she had reported Lily. Not for revenge, not out of spite, but because crimes had consequences, because victims deserved justice, because protecting criminals, even when they were family, meant allowing them to continue hurting innocent people. Maya folded the letter carefully and placed it in the file with all her legal documents. Someday, when the guilt and second-guessing became overwhelming, she would read it again and remember that courage sometimes looked like betrayal to people who had never learned the difference between love and enabling. The recognition she craved would come not from her family, but from other victims, from prosecutors seeking justice, from her own conscience knowing she had done the right thing even when it was the hardest thing. And maybe, eventually, that would be enough. 6 months after Lily's arrest, Miles sat in another federal courthouse, this time for the sentencing hearing. The trial had been swift. Faced with overwhelming evidence and multiple victim testimonies, Lily had eventually accepted a plea deal rather than risk even harsher penalties at trial. 27 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release and full restitution to all victims. Maya had testified during the sentencing phase, not as a vengeful sister seeking maximum punishment, but as a victim advocate,
explaining the real-world impact of financial fraud. She spoke about the months of sleepless nights, the damage to her credit, the ongoing anxiety about financial security, the way identity theft felt like a violation that extended far beyond money. "Your Honor," Maya said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "financial fraud isn't just about numbers on a balance sheet. It's about trust, security, the fundamental belief that the people who love us won't deliberately harm us. The defendant didn't just steal my identity, she stole my sense of safety in the world." Lily had been given the opportunity to speak before sentencing. Maya braced herself for another barrage of blame and excuses, but instead, Lily offered something that sounded like genuine remorse for the first time in the entire process. "I know I've hurt people I love. I know I've made choices that were selfish and wrong. I want my sister to know that I understand now how much damage I caused, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." Maya felt a flicker of something that might have been hope, but she tempered it with the lessons she'd learned about the difference between words and actions. Lily had always been eloquent when she needed to be, charming when it served her purposes. Real change would have to be demonstrated over time, through consistent behavior rather than courtroom speeches. After the sentencing, Maya's parents approached her in the courthouse hallway. They looked older, worn down by months of legal proceedings and media attention, and the slow, painful process of accepting who their younger daughter really was. "We owe you an apology," Maya's mother said quietly. "We asked you to enable her, and we were wrong. We've been wrong for a long time." Maya's father nodded, his expression heavy with regret. "We failed both of you. We failed Lily by not holding her accountable, and we failed you by asking you to sacrifice yourself to protect her. We're sorry." The apology Maya had wanted for months felt strangely anticlimactic now that it finally came. She was grateful for it, but she also understood that their relationship would need to be rebuilt slowly, carefully, with new boundaries and new expectations about what family support actually meant. "Thank you for saying that. I love you both, but things are going to have to be different going forward. I can't be the family member who fixes everyone else's problems anymore. I need to be able to trust that you'll support my decisions about protecting myself." Her parents agreed, though I suspect it would take time for them to truly understand what that meant in practice. Decades of family dynamics don't change overnight, but acknowledgement was a start.
Maya returned to work at the Youth Crisis Center with a new perspective on financial abuse and family trauma. Her own experience had given her insights that no training could provide, and she found herself better equipped to help clients who had been victimized by people they trusted. Marcus, the 17-year-old who had once told Maya she was different from other counselors, was preparing to age out of foster care. During one of their sessions, he brought up Maya's situation, which he'd seen covered in the news. "I heard about what happened with your sister," Marcus said, his usual slouched posture straightening slightly. "That must have been really hard." Maya nodded, considering how much to share. "It was hard, but it also taught me something important about the difference between loyalty and enabling. Sometimes protecting someone means holding them accountable, even when it's painful." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this. "My mom used to steal my Social Security checks," he said finally. "The caseworkers always told me I should forgive her because she was sick, because she was my mom, because family was important. But she never stopped stealing from me until someone made her stop." Maya felt her heart clench with recognition and anger on Marcus's behalf. How does it feel now, knowing someone finally made her accountable? "Safe," Marcus said, without hesitation. "It feels safe, like maybe I can build something without worrying that someone's going to take it away from me." Maya understood that feeling completely. Since Lily's arrest, she had slept better than she had in months. She no longer checked her credit reports obsessively or worried about what financial time bombs might be waiting to explode. The hypervigilance that had followed the discovery of the identity theft was finally beginning to fade. The Youth Crisis Center had also changed in subtle but important ways following the media attention around Maya's case. Donations had increased dramatically, with many contributors specifically mentioning that they were inspired by Maya's courage in speaking out about family financial abuse. The center was able to expand their financial literacy programs and hire additional counselors to work with young adults who had been exploited by family members. Maya found herself becoming an inadvertent expert on family financial fraud, speaking at conferences and training sessions for social workers and law enforcement. She was frequently invited to share her story, to help other professionals understand the complex dynamics that made family financial abuse so difficult to detect and report. The victims often blame themselves, Maya explained during a training session for FBI agents. They wonder if they were too trusting, too naive, too willing to share personal information with family members. But the reality is that our social structures are built on the assumption that families protect each other. When that assumption is violated, victims often feel like they must have done something to cause or deserve the abuse.
1 year after Lily's sentencing, Maya received a letter forwarded through her attorney. It was from Lily, written from federal prison, and Maya almost threw it away without opening it. But something made her hesitate, and finally she decided to read it. The letter was different from anything Lily had ever written to her. It was 2 pages long, written in careful handwriting, with no requests for money or assistance or forgiveness. Instead, it was a detailed acknowledgement of the harm Lily had caused, not just to Maya, but to all her victims. "I've been in therapy here," Lily wrote, "and I'm finally starting to understand how selfish and destructive my behavior was. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I'm not asking for anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I put you through, and I'm genuinely sorry. You were right to report me. You were right to protect yourself and the other people I hurt. I'm grateful that you were brave enough to stop me before I hurt even more people." Maya read the letter twice, feeling a complicated mixture of emotions. There was relief that Lily seemed to finally understand the impact of her actions, but also weariness born from years of manipulation and false apologies. Only time would tell whether this represented genuine change or another attempt to manage Maya's perception of her. Maya decided not to respond to the letter immediately. Instead, she filed it with her other legal documents and tried to focus on the life she was rebuilding. She was dating someone new, a kind, stable man named David, who worked as a librarian and understood the value of quiet consistency. David knew about Lily and the identity theft, but he didn't treat Maya as damaged or tragic. He simply accepted that she had survived something difficult and moved forward with strength and wisdom. Maya had also bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood, using savings that had taken her years to accumulate. The house had a garden where she could grow vegetables and a home office where she could work on the financial literacy curriculum she was developing for teenagers aging out of foster care. It was the first space that felt entirely hers, free from the possibility of invasion or violation. 2 years after Lily's sentencing, Maya received news that Lily was being released early for good behavior and completion of various prison programs. Maya felt a familiar anxiety flutter in her stomach, but it was manageable now, tempered by the security measures she had put in place and the support system she had built. Maya had moved, changed her phone number, and established credit monitoring services that would alert her to any suspicious activity. She had also worked with law enforcement to ensure that Lily would face additional penalties if she violated the terms of her supervised release by attempting any contact with her victims. But Maya also understood that true healing meant living her life without constant fear of what Lily might do next. She had taken reasonable precautions, but she refused to let the possibility of future harm control her present happiness. 3 months after Lily's release, Maya received a package with no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $47,000, the amount of fraudulent debt Maya had incurred, plus interest and fees. There was also a simple note. I know this doesn't fix what I did, but it's a start. I won't contact you again unless you want me to. L. Maya stared at the check for a long time. It represented acknowledgement, restitution, perhaps even genuine remorse. But it also represented something else, the end of a chapter in her life that had been defined by Lily's choices and their consequences. Maya deposited the check into her savings account, where it joined money she had earned through her own hard work and careful planning. The fraudulent debt was finally, truly resolved. But more importantly, Maya had learned that her worth wasn't determined by other people's actions, not even when those people were family. 6 months later, Maya received a wedding invitation from an unexpected source. Robert, the elderly victim who had written to thank her for reporting Lily. At 80 years old, Robert was marrying his longtime companion, and he wanted Maya to know that recovering his stolen money had made the wedding possible.
Maya attended the wedding, a small ceremony in Robert's backyard garden, surrounded by friends who had supported him through the difficult months of financial recovery. She watched this man who had been victimized by her sister celebrate a new beginning, and she felt a deep satisfaction knowing that justice had enabled healing. As Maya drove home from the wedding, she thought about the word legacy and what it really meant. Lily's legacy would be the harm she had caused, the trust she had broken, the years she had spent in prison for federal crimes. But Maya's legacy would be different. The victims she had helped by speaking out, the young people she had taught to protect themselves financially, the family dynamics she had refused to enable, the courage she had shown in choosing justice over comfort. Maya pulled into her driveway and looked at the small house she had bought with money she had earned and saved legitimately. She thought about the life she was building with David, about the teenagers she counseled who were learning to trust again, about the speaking engagements where she helped other professionals understand the complexities of family financial abuse. This was what healing looked like. Not the absence of scars, but the presence of wisdom. Not the restoration of old relationships, but the creation of healthier new ones. Not the forgetting of harm done, but the transformation of that experience into something that could help others. Maya unlocked her front door and stepped into the home she had created for herself, safe, stable, and entirely her own. Tomorrow, she would continue the work of helping others navigate financial crisis and family trauma. Tonight, she would simply be grateful for the courage that had carried her through the darkest chapter of her life and delivered her into something better. 3 years later, Maya stood at the podium at the Pacific Northwest Conference on Financial Crime, looking out at an audience of FBI agents, prosecutors, social workers, and victim advocates. The conference room was packed beyond capacity, with people standing along the walls and sitting in folding chairs that had been hastily arranged to accommodate the overflow crowd. Maya's keynote speech, Family Financial Fraud, Breaking the Silence, had become one of the most requested presentations in her field. When I first walked into the FBI office 3 years ago, I thought I was reporting a single incident of identity theft. I had no idea I was about to uncover a sophisticated criminal operation, or that my decision would ultimately help dozens of victims recover hundreds of thousands of dollars of stolen dollars. Maya cut to her first slide, which showed statistics about family financial fraud that she had helped compile through her work with federal law enforcement. The numbers were staggering. Family members accounted for nearly 30% of all identity theft cases, but less than 10% were ever reported to authorities. The average victim lost over $15,000 and spent nearly 2 years rebuilding their credit and financial stability. The most insidious aspect of family financial fraud,
Maya continued, is the way it weaponizes our most fundamental relationships. We teach children to trust their families, to share personal information freely with people who love them, to assume that blood relationship means protection rather than exploitation. When that trust is violated, victims don't just lose money, they lose their sense of safety in the world. Maya had given variations of this presentation dozens of times, but it never got easier. Each time she spoke, she relived aspects of her own trauma, but she also witnessed the recognition in audience members' faces as they realized they had encountered similar cases in their own work. The questions that followed her presentations were always intense, revealing the depth of confusion and pain that surrounded family financial abuse. After the keynote, Maya was approached by Special Agent Jennifer Walsh from the Denver field office. Agent Walsh was tall and serious, with a sort of focused intensity that Maya had learned to associate with law enforcement professionals who had seen too much human cruelty.
Miss Chen, I wanted to thank you for your presentation, Agent Walsh said. I'm working on a case that has some similarities to yours. 3 sisters using each other's identities to commit fraud across multiple states. The family is pressuring the primary victim not to press charges, and she's wavering. Would you be willing to speak with her? Maya had fielded dozens of similar requests over the past 3 years. Law enforcement agencies, victim advocates, and attorneys regularly asked her to speak with people who were struggling with the decision to report family members for financial crimes. Maya had developed a careful protocol for these conversations, always emphasizing that she couldn't tell people what to do, but could share her own experience and the knowledge she'd gained about the recovery process. Of course, Maya said, have her call me directly. And Agent Walsh, make sure she knows that whatever decision she makes, there are people who will support her. Maya exchanged business cards with Agent Walsh and several other conference attendees before making her way to the hotel bar where she was meeting David for dinner. David had driven down from Portland to attend her speech, something that still surprised Maya even after 2 years of marriage. David's support was quiet and consistent, never dramatic or overwhelming, but always present when she needed it. How did it go? David asked, standing to kiss Maya hello as she approached their table. Good. Hard, but good. Maya settled into her chair and accepted the glass of wine David had already ordered for her. I think we're finally starting to change the conversation about family financial abuse. 5 years ago, most law enforcement agencies treated these cases as civil matters. Now they're recognizing them as the serious crimes they are. David nodded, studying Maya's face with the careful attention he always paid to her emotional state after difficult presentations. Are you okay? You look tired. Maya was tired, but it was the satisfied exhaustion that came from meaningful work rather than the bone-deep weariness she remembered from the early days of her recovery. I'm okay. Actually, I have some news that might interest you. Maya reached into her briefcase and pulled out a letter she had received the day before. The letter had read, United States Department of Justice, and the contents had left her speechless when she first read them. I've been asked to serve on a federal task force studying family financial fraud, Maya said, watching David's face light up with pride. They want me to help develop new protocols for investigating these cases and supporting victims. David reached across the table to squeeze Maya's hand. Maya, that's incredible. You're going to be making policy at the federal level. Maya felt a surge of satisfaction and purpose. The scared, confused woman who had walked into the FBI office 3 years ago would never have imagined that her painful experience would evolve into meaningful work that could protect others. But trauma, Maya had learned, could be transformed into wisdom if you were willing to do the difficult work of healing and growth. There's something else, Maya said, pulling out another document. Remember that book proposal I've been working on? My agent got an offer from a major publisher. They want me to write a comprehensive guide to financial recovery after family financial fraud. David's grin widened. A book deal? Maya, that's amazing. Maya had been working on the book proposal for over a year,
driven by the number of victims who contacted her asking for resources and guidance. There were plenty of books about identity theft recovery, but very few addressed the specific challenges that arose when the perpetrator was a family member. Maya wanted to fill that gap, to create a resource that acknowledged both the practical and emotional complexities of family financial fraud. 5 years later,
Maya's book, Stolen Trust, A Guide to Recovery After Family Financial Fraud, had been published to critical acclaim and commercial success. It had spent 12 weeks on various bestseller lists and had been optioned for a documentary film. More importantly, it had reached thousands of victims who found validation and practical guidance in its pages. Maya had left her job at the Youth Crisis Center to work full-time as a consultant and advocate, splitting her time between speaking engagements, writing, and direct work with victims. She had also launched a nonprofit organization called the Family Financial Fraud Recovery Network, which provided support groups, legal resources, and educational materials for people who had been victimized by relatives. The organization had grown beyond Maya's wildest expectations, with chapters in 43 states and a staff of 12 full-time employees. Maya's office was located in a converted warehouse in Portland's Arts District, and the walls were covered with thank you letters from victims who had found healing and justice through the resources the organization provided. On a rainy Thursday afternoon in March, Maya was reviewing grant applications when her assistant, Carmen, knocked on her office door. "Maya, there's someone here to see you," Carmen said, her expression uncertain. "She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's personal. Her name is Lily Chen." Maya felt her stomach drop. She hadn't seen or spoken to Lily since the sentencing hearing 5 years earlier, though she had received occasional updates through the federal probation office. Lily had completed her supervised release without incident, had maintained steady employment, and had reportedly continued with therapy and support groups for people with addictive behaviors around money and fraud. But Maya had lived a life that didn't include Lily, had created boundaries that protected her from the possibility of further manipulation or harm. The unexpected appearance of her sister felt like a violation of the safety she had carefully constructed. "Tell her I need 5 minutes," Maya said, taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. She called David, who was at his library branch across town, and briefly explained the situation. "Do you want me to come over?" David asked immediately. "No, I think I need to handle this myself. But stay by your phone, okay?" Maya straightened her shoulders and walked to the reception area where Lily sat in one of the comfortable chairs Maya had chosen specifically to help victims feel welcomed and safe. Lily looked older, more worn than Maya remembered, but also somehow more substantial, less fragile than the woman who had collapsed during her arrest. "Hello, Maya," Lily said, standing as Maya approached her. "Thank you for seeing me. I know I don't have the right to ask for your time." Maya gestured toward her office, and Lily followed her down the hall lined with photographs from Maya's speaking engagements and awards from victim advocacy organizations. Maya noticed Lily looking at the images, taking in the evidence of the life Maya had built from the wreckage of Lily's betrayal. "Why are you here, Lily?" Maya asked once they were both seated in her office. "I wanted to apologize," she said simply. "I mean, really apologize. Not the kind of apology I gave in court because my lawyer told me to, but a real acknowledgement of what I did to you and how it affected your life." Maya studied her sister's face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. But Lily's expression was open and direct in a way Maya didn't remember from their childhood or adult relationship. "I've been in therapy for 5 years, not just the mandated counseling from prison, but real therapy to understand why I made the choices I made. I've learned a lot about myself, about the way I was raised to believe I was entitled to things I hadn't earned, and about how I used charm and manipulation to avoid taking responsibility for my actions." Maya remained silent,
waiting for Lily to continue.
I know I destroyed our relationship, Lily said, her voice steady but heavy with regret. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be fixed. I know that the work you're doing now, helping other victims, came from the pain I caused you. And I want you to know that I understand the magnitude of what I did. Maya felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. This was the acknowledgement she had wanted for years, the recognition that Lily's actions had been deliberate and harmful and inexcusable. But it was also confirmation that the sister she had loved and protected and made excuses for had never really existed. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Lily continued. I'm not asking to be part of your life again. I just wanted you to hear from me directly that you were right to report me, right to protect yourself and the other victims. I was a criminal, and I deserved the consequences I faced. Maya sat quietly for a moment, processing Lily's words and her own complicated emotions. Finally, she spoke. Thank you for saying that. It means something to hear you acknowledge the harm you caused. Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. But I need you to understand that this conversation doesn't change anything between us. I've built a life that doesn't include you, and I intend to keep it that way. Lily nodded, looking neither surprised nor hurt by Maya's boundary. I understand, and I respect that. I just wanted you to know that I take full responsibility for what happened, and that I'm grateful that you had the courage to stop me. Lily stood to leave, then hesitated. Maya, I know this might sound strange, but I'm proud of you. The work you're doing, the way you've turned something terrible into something that helps people, it's remarkable. I'm proud to be related to you, even though I have no right to that pride. After Lily left, Maya sat alone in her office, feeling emotionally drained, but also strangely peaceful. The conversation had provided closure she didn't know she needed, confirmation that her choices had been right and that Lily had finally learned to take responsibility for her actions. Maya looked around her office at the evidence of the work she had built from the ashes of her sister's betrayal, the awards, the photographs, the thank you letters, the grant applications for programs that would help other victims. All of it had grown from her decision to report Lily's crimes rather than enable them. 10 years later, Maya stood in the rose garden behind her house, watching her 8-year-old daughter Elena help David plant new bushes along the back fence. Elena had inherited Maya's careful attention to detail and David's quiet determination, approaching the gardening project with the sort of methodical precision that made Maya smile. "Mom, how deep should we dig the holes?" Elena called out, her hands already dirty from the rich Portland soil. "Deep enough for the roots to spread," Maya replied, the same answer her own mother had given her decades ago when they had worked together in the garden at the house on Maple Street. Some family traditions, Maya had learned, were worth preserving. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Carmen, now the executive director of the Family Financial Fraud Recovery Network. "Maya, I wanted you to see this before it goes live tomorrow. We just hit our milestone. 50,000 victims helped through our programs. The press release goes out in the morning." Maya smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. 50,000 people who had found resources, support, and validation through an organization that had grown from her own painful experience. The number represented not just statistics, but individual human beings who had reclaimed their financial lives and their sense of safety in the world. Elena ran over, her cheeks flushed from exertion and excitement. "Mom, Dad says we can plant the herb garden next weekend. Can we grow the kind of basil you use in your pasta sauce?" "Absolutely," Maya said, ruffling Elena's hair. "We'll grow basil and oregano and maybe some of those cherry tomatoes you like." Maya had been intentional about creating a childhood for Elena that was different from her own, one where boundaries were respected, where honesty was valued over charm, where taking responsibility for mistakes was modeled rather than punished. Elena was growing up with a clear understanding of money, budgeting, and financial responsibility, but also with the security of knowing that her parents would never use her trust against her. David walked over, brushing dirt from his hands.
"The garden's going to be beautiful this year," he said, wrapping his arms around Maya from behind. "Elena's got your eye for planning and organization." Maya leaned back against David's chest, watching Elena chase their dog Charlie around the yard. This life, stable, loving, built on mutual respect and genuine care, felt like a miracle sometimes. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it was ordinary in all the ways Maya's childhood had not been. That evening, after Elena was asleep and David was grading papers in his study, Maya sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, working on the final chapter of her second book. This one was focused specifically on helping parents recognize signs of financial exploitation in their families and create healthier dynamics around money and accountability. The chapter she was writing dealt with one of the most difficult aspects of family financial fraud, the way it affected subsequent generations. Maya had interviewed dozens of adult children whose parents had stolen their identities, and the patterns were devastatingly consistent. Trust issues, hypervigilance about financial security, difficulty maintaining healthy relationships, and often a tendency to either become controlling about money or to avoid financial responsibility entirely. Maya had been intentional about creating a childhood for Elena that was different from her own, one where boundaries were respected, where honesty was valued over charm, where taking responsibility for mistakes was modeled rather than punished. Elena was growing up with a clear understanding of money, budgeting, and financial responsibility, but also with the security of knowing that her parents would never use her trust against her. Maya's phone rang, interrupting her writing. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something made her answer it. "Miss Chen, this is Detective Sarah Morrison from the Seattle Police Department. I'm calling because we have someone in custody who claims to know you, and she's asking to speak with you specifically." Maya's stomach tightened. "What's her name?" "Lily Chen. She says she's your sister. She was arrested earlier today on charges of credit card fraud and identity theft. She's asking for you to come to Seattle, says it's urgent that she speak with you." Maya closed her eyes, feeling a familiar mixture of disappointment and inevitability. 5 years had passed since Lily's visit to her office, 5 years during which Maya had hoped that her sister had truly changed, had learned to live without exploiting other people's trust. "Detective Morrison," Maya said carefully, "I need you to understand that my sister and I have no relationship. She's a convicted federal felon who previously stole my identity and committed fraud using my personal information. I will not be coming to Seattle, and I do not want any contact with her." "I understand, ma'am. I just wanted to let you know in case she tries to contact you directly or mentions your name in connection with these new charges."
After Detective Morrison hung up, Maya sat in her quiet kitchen, processing the news. Lily was still Lily, still choosing crime over legitimate work, still believing she could manipulate her way out of consequences, still thinking that family relationships could be weaponized to serve her purposes. But Maya was no longer the person who could be manipulated by guilt or family obligation. She had built boundaries that couldn't be crossed, had created a life that couldn't be invaded, had learned the difference between love and enabling so thoroughly that Lily's renewed criminal activity felt more like distant news than personal crisis. Maya deleted Detective Morrison's number from her phone and returned to her writing. Tomorrow, she would add a note to her file about Lily's latest arrest, information that might be useful for her work with other victims. Tonight, she would finish her chapter about breaking generational patterns of financial abuse and then go upstairs to the life she had created with people who loved her without trying to exploit her. 15 years later. Maya stood at the podium of the International Conference on Financial Crime, delivering what would be her final keynote address before retirement. At 55, she had spent the last 15 years becoming one of the world's leading experts on family financial fraud, had written 3 books, had built an organization that operated in 12 countries, and had personally helped thousands of victims reclaim their lives. The audience was larger than any she had addressed before. Over 2,000 law enforcement officers, prosecutors, victim advocates, and policymakers from around the world. Maya looked out at the sea of faces,
many of them familiar from conferences and collaborations spanning more than a decade. When I first reported my sister's crimes 15 years ago, Maya began, I thought I was simply trying to protect my own financial future. I had no idea I was about to embark on a journey that would redefine my understanding of family, justice, and the meaning of true courage. Maya clicked to her final slide, which showed statistics that represented the cumulative impact of her work. Over 200,000 victims helped through her organization, over $50 million in fraudulent debt resolved, new federal legislation passed in 8 countries, and training protocols implemented by law enforcement agencies worldwide. The most important thing I've learned, Maya continued, is that healing from family financial fraud isn't about forgetting what happened or forgiving those who harmed us. It's about reclaiming our power to define what family means, what love looks like, and what we're willing to accept in our relationships. The standing ovation that followed was longer and more enthusiastic than any Maya had received, but what moved her most were the individual conversations afterward. Victim after victim approached to thank her, to share their own stories of recovery, to express gratitude for the validation and resources that had made their healing possible. Among the crowd was Robert, now 88 years old, and still sharp despite his age. He and his wife had traveled from Portland specifically to attend Maya's farewell address. "Maya, my dear," Robert said, embracing him with the warmth of someone who had become family through shared struggle. "Thank you for giving me back my life 15 years ago. Thank you for showing all of us that we deserve justice." Maya hugged Robert tightly, remembering the letter that he had written to her all those years ago, the validation that had helped her understand that her courage mattered beyond her own healing. After the conference, Maya flew home to Portland, where David and Elena were waiting with a celebration dinner and a cake decorated with the words, "Congratulations, Mom," in Elena's careful handwriting. Elena was now 23, a recent graduate of law school who had chosen to specialize in victim advocacy, inspired by her mother's work, but determined to carve her own path. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Elena said, as they shared cake in the kitchen where Maya had written her first book proposal years earlier. "You took something terrible and turned it into something that helped so many people." Maya looked around at her family, David, still steady and supportive after 18 years of marriage, Elena, confident and compassionate in ways that Maya's own generation had struggled to achieve, and felt a profound sense of completion. Not because her work was finished, but because she had successfully broken the cycle of dysfunction that had defined her childhood family. "What's next?" David asked, knowing that Maya was constitutionally incapable of true retirement.
Maya smiled, thinking of the plans she had been developing for the next phase of her life. "I want to work more directly with young people, maybe develop programs for high schools and colleges about financial protection and healthy family relationships. And I want to spend more time with you two, maybe travel a little, plant a bigger garden." That night, as Maya and David sat on their back porch, watching the sunset paint their garden in shades of gold and pink, Maya's thoughts turned briefly to Lily. She had heard through legal channels that Lily was serving her 3rd federal sentence, this one for 10 years after being caught running an elaborate cryptocurrency fraud scheme. At 53, Lily would likely spend the rest of her productive life in and out of prison, having never learned that there were other ways to live. Maya felt sadness for the sister she had once loved, but it was a clean sadness now, uncomplicated by guilt or responsibility. Lily's choices were her own, just as Maya's choices were hers. Maya had chosen healing, growth, service to others, and the slow work of building something meaningful from the wreckage of betrayal. Lily had chosen to remain a criminal. "Any regrets?" David asked quietly, as if he could read Maya's thoughts. Maya considered the question seriously. The path she had chosen, reporting Lily, enduring the family breakdown, building a career from trauma, becoming a public figure who spoke about painful private experiences, had been difficult in ways she could never have anticipated. But it had also led to this, A marriage built on genuine partnership, a daughter who understood the difference between love and exploitation, work that had helped hundreds of thousands of people, and a sense of integrity that could withstand any criticism. "No regrets," Maya said, taking David's hand. "It was hard, but it was right. And it led to this." As the stars appeared in the darkening sky, Maya felt the deep satisfaction of a life lived with purpose and courage. She had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you could do was to hold people accountable for their actions, that protecting yourself wasn't selfish but necessary, and that healing was possible even from the deepest betrayals. The woman who had once been afraid to report her own sister's crimes had become someone who helped others find their own courage, who showed them that justice and healing could coexist, that families could be chosen as well as born into. Maya had not just survived Lily's betrayal, she had transformed it into something that made the world a little safer for other people who had been harmed by those they trusted most. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help, new ways to use the hard-won wisdom that had grown from the ashes of her family's destruction. But tonight, Maya Chen sat in her garden with her chosen family, grateful for the courage that had carried her through the darkness and delivered her into the light. Subscribe to Stories That Matter, where silence is never forgotten.